Soldier Jack. Jack was born a lazy baby. He grew up to be a lazy child and grew further up to be a lazy adult. Every morning, Jack's dad would walk into his room and say, "Jack, get up." And Jack would just turn over and say, "I don't want to get up." Jack's dad was a patient man. He'd try it again. "Jack, come on now, get up." And Jack would say, "But I just told you, I don't want to get up." Well, that would make Jack's dad angry. He'd walk across the floor, pull the covers back, and give Jack a whack. And Jack would say, "Ow! I'm getting up. I'm getting up." Well, this went on for 25 years, and Jack decided he was tired of getting whacked to get up out of the bed. So he decided he was going to run off from home at 25 years old. Well, he took off. Well, sir, Jack was gone about a week when he realized he was getting hungry. No work, you don't eat. As he was walking down the road, he happened to see a sign on a tree that read, "Soldiers Needed." And Jack said, "That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to join the army." So Jack went to the army, went over to the sergeant and said, "How do I join the army?" The sergeant said, "All you do is you write your name on this line here." And Jack did. He wrote Jack. Jack. And the sergeant said, "You're in the army." Jack stayed in the army for 10 years, just sleeping and eating, 'cause the sergeant said, "We ain't got no wars going on. We ain't doing nothing but sleeping and eating." And Jack said, "Fine, I do that well." Well, sir, 10 years of Jack's life, sleeping and eating. And one day, Jack realized that he was bored just sleeping and eating, so he said to the sergeant, "I think I'd like to get out of the army. How do I do it?" And the sergeant said, "Erase your name off that line." So Jack erased his name, Jack, and he was out of the army. Jack said, "Now, do you pay me any money?" And the sergeant said, "I told you, Jack, when you came to the army, that we didn't have no wars to fight, so we don't pay no money. But when you get out of the army, we help you along. We give you a brand new suit and 2 loaves of bread." Jack said, "That's fine. I'd like that new suit, but you can keep them 2 loaves of bread." The sergeant said, "Why?" Jack said, "Well, I don't believe they sliced." The sergeant said, "Jack, get them 2 loaves of bread and get out of the army." Well, Jack put on his new suit, took 1 loaf of bread and put it up under one arm, took the other loaf of bread and put it up under the other arm. He decided that he was going home. Now, for a long time, Jack's parents and his 2 brothers, Tom and Will, and Jack had lived up in the hills. Well, sir, that was all right, but 5 years before Jack got out of the army, Jack's mom and dad had passed away. There wasn't nobody at home but Jack's 2 brothers, Tom and Will, and they was twice as lazy as Jack, and Jack didn't figure he ought to go back home, 'cause then it would be 3 of them up there that wasn't no good. So he decided he was going to find him a home on the flat land. So he took off, and he walked 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 and he walked. And he walked 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 and he walked. And he walked 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 and he walked. Well, long about 12 noon, Jack come up on an old man standing out in the middle of the road, leaning over a walking cane, twiddling his thumbs. Jack walked up to him and said, "Howdy do." The old man said, "Howdy, Jack." Seemed to know Jack. Well, sir, Jack said, what are you doing?" And the old fellow said, "I'm twiddling my thumbs." Jack said, "Well, I'm going to find me a home. I'll be off." And the old man said, "Jack, before you leave, what's that you got there beneath your arm?" Jack had to look, and then he said, "Oh, these here's my 2 loaves of bread that they give me in the army." The old man said, "Jack, do you think you could give me a slice of that bread?" Jack said, "I'll do better than that. I'll give you a whole loaf. It's just getting sweaty up here up under my arm." So he gave the old man a whole loaf of bread. The old man said, "Jack, I pointed you out a good man the first time I set eyes on you." He said, "Because you're such a good man, I want to give you something for giving me this whole loaf of bread." Jack said, "No, that's all right. The old man said, "Why don't you want what I want to give you?" Jack said, "It would just be one more thing to carry." The old man said, "Don't you worry about that." The old man unbuttoned his coat, had on a fine red pair of galluses. Now around one of his gallus buttons was a string, and on the end of that string there was a sack. And the old man unwound that string from round his gallus button and handed that sack to Jack. And Jack took it and said, "Well, thank you very much. What is it?" The old man said, "Why, Jack, that's a magic sack." Jack said, "It is? A magic sack? What do you do with the magic sack?" Well, the old man said, "If there's anything that you want to catch, just open that sack, point it in the direction of what you want to catch, beat on the side of that sack, and say the magic words, 'Whackety whack, get into my sack,' and you'll be able to catch everything that you want to." Jack said, "Woo-hoo! I want to keep this." Jack opened up his coat, wound that string around his own gallus button, said goodbye to the old man, lifted that one loaf of bread beneath his arm, and kept a-going. Well, it was getting late on in the evening, and Jack was getting tired. Still hadn't found no place he wanted to spend the night or live. But he walked up on another old man leaning over a walking cane, twiddling his thumbs. Jack was always polite. He spoke to him. "Howdy do there, old man." Old man said, "Howdy." Jack seemed to know Jack. Jack said, "Well, what are you doing?" The old man said, "Just standing out here." Jack said, "Well, I'll be on my way. I'm looking for somewhere to live." The old man said, "Before you go, Jack, could you give me a little piece of that bread you got up under your arm?" Jack said, "Here, you can have the whole loaf. It's just an old piece of sweaty bread. Here, you can have it." The old man said, "Jack, I thank you. I think you're a fine fella, and I want to give you something for that." Jack said, "Oh, here we go again." The old man went way down into his pocket, come up with a little narrow shallow glass, handed it to Jack. Jack looked up through it, looked down through it, held it out, and said, "It ain't made for drinking, is it?" "Oh," the old man said, "Jack, that's a magic glass. You pour fresh spring water down in the middle of that glass, and you will be able to see the death angel anywhere it stands." Jack said, "Why'd I want to see the death angel?" Old man said, "You never know. You just never know." Jack said, "Well, I'm going to keep it because you give it to me. Thank you very much." And Jack went on his way. Jack was getting tired. It was getting late on into the night, and Jack was thinking, "I don't care what the next town looks like. I'm going to spend the night there." Just as he rounded a curve, there on the side of the road was a boarding house. Jack said, "Well, that's where I'm going to spend the night." He went over and knocked on the door, and a lady answered the door, and she said, "How do you do?" Jack said, "I'm Jack, just got out of the army. See my new suit? I had the 2 loaves of bread, but I give them away. I ain't got no money. I'm going to spend the night here." The woman said, "Now listen here. If you don't have any money, then you don't have anywhere to stay. Now get on out of here." And she slammed the door. Jack was doomed. He knew he was going to have to sleep out in the woods, so he walked off the porch and he followed a fence that led way back into the woods. And Jack was looking at that old cold ground, and he was hungry, when all at once he looked up, and there, sitting on the fence, were 7 great big fat wild turkeys. And Jack said, "Woo! Look at there. If I had me a shotgun or a knife, well, I'd shoot me one of them birds and I'd roast it for supper." But I don't have a shotgun. And then Jack remembered. He unbuttoned his coat, unwound that string from around his gallus button, took that sack, pointed it in the direction of the turkeys, and said the magic words, "Whackety whack, get into my sack." And one by one, all 7 of them birds jumped into Jack's sack. He tied it up and held it out and looked at it and said, "What am I going to do with them now?" And then he remembered. The boarding house. He turned around, went back to the boarding house, knocked on the door, and the lady come out and she said, "It's you again. Get on away from here." "Wait a minute, lady," Jack said. "Do you see this sack?" And she said, "I do." Jack said, "Well, I got me 7 great big fat wild turkeys in here. Would you buy 'em from me?" "Well, sir," she said, "I've been looking for some turkeys. I most certainly will." He said, "Bring my sack back." She took the turkeys, weighed 'em up, and paid Jack $5 for 'em. Now, back in them days, $5 was a whole lot of money for 7 great big fat wild turkeys. Why, Jack had enough money to eat supper, spend the night, get up, eat breakfast, and still have some change left over. Well, Jack liked this town, thought he'd stay here. But that boarding house would get too expensive, so he decided he was going to look for another home where he could live by himself. He went looking that day. About 12 o'clock he found something. But he didn't realize he had found him a home. On the other side of town, way up on a hill, was a great big 2-story house. You know, the kind with them columns out in front. About 6 or 8 of them. I don't know how many it was, but Jack saw that house and he said, "Woo-hoo, bet you rich folks live in that house." Why, Jack had never seen a house like that. And as he looked down, there, standing in front of the house, was an old man. So Jack said to him, "Ain't that a fine house?" And the old man said, "Yeah, it is." Jack said, "Who lives in a house like that?" And the old man said, "Nobody." Jack said, "You mean to tell me that house is empty? Why, I can rent the house." The old man said, "No, you can't." Jack said, "Well, I can buy the house then." The old man said, "No, you can't." Well, Jack said, "Well, what's wrong with it? I can't rent it, I can't buy it. Who in the world owns it?" And the old man said, "I do." Jack said, "You own the house and you won't rent it to me and you won't sell it to me?" Old man said, "I'll give it to you." Jack said, "You would? You'd give me that big old pretty house? What'd I have to do to get it?" The old man said, "Just spend one night in it." Jack said, "One night? One night? What's wrong with the house?" The old man said, "I'll tell you like this. A house is haunted." Jack said, "It's haunted? It's haunted? It's haunted with what?" The old man said, "Haints." Jack said, "Haints? What's a haint?" The old man said, "Little old bitty nasty green critters." Jack said, "Well, I ain't never seen a green haint before." The old man said, "Well, they's in there. If you go in there, they'll chew you up and you'll be a green haint." Jack said, "I ain't never been scared of no haints, green or otherwise. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to spend the night and that house is going to be mine tomorrow." Jack started to walk into the house when he remembered he was going to have to stay there all day and all night, and he didn't have anything to eat, and he didn't have but a few pennies, not enough to buy him anything. So he turned to the old man and he said, I don't have no money. I wonder if you could bring me a picnic lunch and a corn cob pipe and some tobacco and maybe a quilt to sleep on." Old man said, "I'm going to bring you all that." He said, "But I'm going to give you a little advice. You better eat that picnic lunch before 9 o'clock. You better smoke that corn cob pipe before 10 o'clock. And you better get all sleeping, and you're going to be done before 12 o'clock, 'cause after that, them haints going to eat you up." Jack said, "You let me worry about that." So Jack went into the house and built himself a fire, and he was sitting there getting himself warm when the old man brought in everything that he was supposed to have, and then he took off. Well, Jack got a little bored just looking into the fire, so he decided that, well, he'd like to smoke his pipe. He grabbed the pipe and started stuffing the tobacco down in the pipe, took a straw, lit it in the fireplace, and tried to light the tobacco. But this was a brand new corncob pipe, and they don't smoke so easy. So Jack had to start all over again. He started cleaning the tobacco out of the pipe, and he kept cleaning out that pipe, when all at once, way up in the attic, Jack heard this strange noise, and it sounded like, "Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo, ah." Jack said, "Uh-oh." But Jack never let on that he was scared. He just kept right on cleaning that pipe out, when all at once, way down in the cellar, he heard it again. and it sounded like, woo, 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 ah. And Jack said, oh, no. And all at once, this awful sound came roaring down the chimney, and there a great big round green ball fell right at Jack's feet, and out of the middle of that green ball popped a little green haint, and all Jack could say was, howdy do. And the haint said, what are you doing here in my house? Jack said, now listen here, this here's gonna be my house tomorrow. And the haint said, oh no it ain't, 'cause we're gonna eat you up tonight. Jack said, I ain't scared of you, I just ain't scared of you. When all at once Jack got quiet, and he heard this awful breathing sound behind him. And Jack turned around. There, standing behind him, were 6 of the ugliest, greenest haints you ever laid eyes on, and all Jack could say was, howdy do, howdy do, howdy do. And the haints said, you had better get out of here. And Jack said, now I done told you I ain't scared of you. Well, the haints saw that Jack wasn't scared of them, so they had to do something to get their house back. So the head haint said, all right, seeing as how you ain't scared of us, we're gonna play a little game with you. Little game of cards. If we win, we're gonna eat you up. Jack said, well, I just got out of the army. I play a pretty good game of cards. What if I should win? We still gonna eat you up. Jack said, that's fair. So they all took a seat at the table and laid that big deck of cards out and commenced to playing. The haints all laid out great big yellow gold nuggets, and Jack said, now just a minute. Well, I'd like to have some gold nuggets to play with. So all 7 of them haints stood up, laid their hands out in front of them, and yellow gold nuggets fell from each finger. It made stacks and piles of gold all over the floor. They gave Jack part of it, and they took the rest, and the game went like this. Jack would win a hand, and the haints would win a hand. Jack would win a hand, and the haints would win a hand. Jack would win a hand, and the haints would win a hand. Jack would win a hand, and the haints would win a hand. Jack got plumb tired of that, got up, unbuttoned his coat, unwound that string from around his gallus button, took that sack, pointed it in the direction of the haints, and said the magic words, whackety-whack, get into my sack. And all 7 of them little green haints jumped down on the bottom of Jack's sack. He wrapped that sack up, throwed it in the corner, got up, ate his picnic lunch, smoked his corncob pipe, and slept on his quilt for the rest of the night. The next morning, the old man was outside waiting to see who came out of the house first. The door started opening. Jack stepped out on the porch and took a great big old yawn. The old man said, you're still alive! You're still alive! And Jack said, well, did you think I wouldn't be? The old man said, but them haints, they didn't eat you up. Jack stepped back into the house, got the sack, took it out, and handed it to the old man. The old man looked up at Jack and said, what's in here? Jack said, them haints. The old man threw the sack back. I don't want 'em. Don't give 'em to me. Jack said, take 'em down to the river. Find the deepest end, open that sack up, and drop 'em in. Bring my sack back. And that's what the old man did. The minute he gave Jack the sack, he said, the house is yours. Jack went into the house, and lo and behold, them haints had left every piece of that gold. Jack was a rich man. Jack had so much gold, he poured some down between the walls. He buried some beneath the floor. He hid some up in the attic, put some beneath his mattress, and put the rest in his pockets. Jack was a rich man. But Jack was a lonely man. There was only one woman that Jack saw that he liked, and that was the king's daughter. Well, the king's daughter used to sit down on the king's front porch, and when she'd see Jack a-comin', she'd wave at him. Howdy, Jack. And Jack, he's so shy, he'd wave back, howdy do. Well, this went on for months and months and months. Till one day Jack got up enough nerve to go to the king and ask the king if he could marry his daughter. That day Jack walked up to the king's front door and knocked. The king opened the door. The minute he laid his eyes on Jack, he commenced to crying. Jack said, "King, what's wrong with you?" The king said, "Jack," he said, "Jack, my daughter's a-leaving me." Jack said, "Sure enough, where's she going?" "Oh, you don't understand, Jack. She's passing away." Jack said, "She's passing away? Where's she passing to?" "No, Jack, no. She's dying. Doctor's been here. Said she's gonna die at any time. Death's gonna take her." Jack said, "Well, I'm sorry. I didn't know." King said, "Jack, what are you doing here?" Jack said, "Well, I came to ask you if I could marry your daughter." "Jack, you'd make me a fine son-in-law. You'd make me a fine son-in-law. You're a fine man. And you're rich, too. But she's gonna die at any time." Jack said, "Well, do you think I could see her before she dies?" King said, "You better hurry. Death's gonna get her at any time." Jack ran down the hallway, opened the king's daughter's room, and into her room. There she was, low, low sick. Jack ran over to the bed, and there on a table was a pitcher and a bowl. And inside that pitcher there was fresh spring water. Jack just pulled out his little glass, reached for that pitcher, poured the fresh spring water down into that glass, and held that glass all around the room. And he saw it. The death angel standing on the back of the king's daughter's bed, getting ready to grab her at any moment. Jack unbuttoned his coat, unwound that string round his gallus button, took that sack, pointed it in the direction of the death angel, and said, "Whackety-whack, get into my sack." And the death angel flew up and down into the sack. Jack tied it up, ran down the hallway, down the road, and into the woods, and tied that sack in the tallest oak tree he could find. When Jack returned, the king's daughter was up, alive, and well, and Jack and the king's daughter got married, and they lived, and they lived. Jack lived to be 600 years old. On Jack's 601st birthday, he was going down the road to a birthday party they was having for him, and walking in front of him was an old man that was so old he was bent half in two and his nose was dragging the ground. Well, Jack's always been polite. He spoke to the old man. "Howdy do there, old man?" The old man turned round and said, "Howdy, sonny." Jack said, "What's wrong with you?" The old man said, "I'm old, can't you see?" Jack said, "Well, I can see that you're old, but how old are you?" "Well, last count, I was 900 years old." Jack said, 900? How'd you get to be 900 years old? Old man said, "I lived to be 900 years old." Jack said, "Well, I know that you lived, but why didn't you die before you got to be 900? The old man said, "Ain't you heard? Ain't nobody told you? Years and years ago, some dumbbell took the death angel and tied it up in a sack, and since then ain't nobody been able to die." Jack said, "Do you reckon that was me?" Jack turned around, and he went home, and he got his shotgun, and he brought it back to the woods, and he looked all around the trees till he saw it, the sack, and he shot 3 times, and one of the shots hit the string on that sack, and the sack started to fall, and the top opened wide. And I guess you know that Jack was the first one to go. But he had lived a long and happy life.